Hello and welcome to another anime lore and theory video. I'm Shergok, your host, and today we are going to take a closer look at what would happen if instead of Ainz or Gon, the siblings Bukubuku Shagama and Peroronchino would both have been transported to the new world. But before we're going to take a closer look at any of this, let me quickly thank my Patreons for supporting this channel, as well as a thanks to all users of the YouTube thanks function for making one-time donations. And with that said, let's get to the topic at hand. First of all, it is relatively likely that both of them ended up together in Nazarick in an alternate timeline, simply because they are siblings and often did things together. And I should emphasize again that they are normal siblings, not typical anime siblings, meaning nothing abnormal is going on between them. And Peroronchino is quite uninhibited, to say the absolute least, even though he doesn't want to ride his sister. And he's also very competitive, whereas Bukubuku Shagama can keep him in check and, as the older sister, acts relatively dominant towards him. And fun fact, since she's a seiyuu, a Japanese voice actress, Bukubuku Shagama used her voice so effectively and sometimes so threateningly that other members of the Grey Tomb were sometimes genuinely afraid of her. While Peroronchino focused on offensive and maximum combat efficiency, Bukubuku Shagama played as a slime, whose role was to manage enemy aggro. In other words, she ensured that glass cannons like Ulbertelane Odl or ranged fighters like her own brother Peroronchino could fully focus on attacking without constantly being dragged into close combat or attacked themselves. And this power dynamic would likely continue in the new world. Peroronchino would probably be very ambitious, but Bukubuku Shagama would keep him in check. And this brings us to the first day in Nazarick, which would likely be a shock for both of them. Not only are they cut off from the old world, unlike Ainz, they also wouldn't probably be ashamed of them, would suddenly be alive. And they would now be leaders of perhaps the greatest military force in the known world. And I think the two would react very differently to the situation. The first thing that would likely happen is that they'd either excitedly explore the surroundings or try to adjust or still feel exhausted from their previous lives. Their work obligations left them little time to play Yggdrasil online or to have much personal time at all. And remember, they were years away from the Grey Tomb at that point. So I think that, as funny as it sounds, they probably think, well, it's just a side effect of some medication, some illusions or delusions. Let's just go to bed and I have to work tomorrow. After both wake up and realize, nope, this isn't a dream, we are really here, this is where the fun thing would begin for both of them, because Bukubuku Shagama would visit Aura and Mare, and both would be overjoyed to see their creatress, who is like a mother to them. Even though Aura and Mare were created more as a sibling joke, Bukubuku Shagama would still be delighted to see her de facto children alive and well. And I think she would spend a lot of time with them, and since she hadn't logged on for such a long time, I'd even let them show her around in their home, and generally they would have a good time together. Peroronchino would also have a good time with his own NPC. The blood-sucking, and at this point not just blood-sucking, Shelty Bloodfallen. And fun fact, Shelty was written with so much detail and so many interests that she received absolutely 0% of Peroronchino's personality. Yeah, lucky. In other words, even though Shelty was designed as a collection of all of Peroronchino's 18+ interests, he would still spend time with her and the vampire brides and not just see himself in the actions and thoughts of his own character, at least not unintentionally. Afterwards, both siblings would probably talk in the evening about what they think of the new world. And since they find a better life here, and at least part of their own family exists in the new world, I believe they would prefer to stay, and wouldn't look very way back into the old world and long for their old home, and the issues they had there. And then Bukubuku Shagama would scold Peroronchino because she would know exactly why he spent so much time with Shelt here. But even if they argue fiercely, they are still siblings and they love each other, Again, like siblings. I think this is why it wouldn't escalate into a sibling war within the Grey Tomb of Nazarick, as Bukubuku Shagamas already used to her brother's explicit behavior and also well and truly in charge of him. And once the siblings have sorted out their emotions and feelings, they might not immediately realize that they are truly in a new world. It would probably be Albedo or Demiurge who would eventually approach them and report that their surroundings had significantly changed. In other words, only a few days after arriving in the new world would they finally realize that they are not in Yggdrasil 9, but actually in a different world. And I think both siblings would then send out troops and scouts and of course themselves to explore this world. Bukubuku Shagama with Aura and Mare, and Peroronchino with Sheltir. However, since both took their time, the Sunlight Scripture would be able to kill Gazev Stronov and wipe out Karen village. Karajita and Clementine would also have carried out their own plan, and a massive horde of undead would have overrun the fortress city of Irantel. Even the Cat's plane might react to the sudden surge of the undead in the area. So the Sunlight Scripture would also try to contain this chaos, and since they were near the forest, namely that around Karen, Aura and Mare would be the first to encounter them, and therefore Bukubuku Shagama will meet the Theocracy first. And here it gets really interesting. Aura and Mare are elves, and therefore technically enemies of the Theocracy. However, since they are dark elves from the Great Forest of Top, in the eyes of the Sunlight Scripture, and not from the Great Forest of Evasha, the Sunlight Scripture, especially the leader, would likely proceed with caution and not openly attack. Furthermore, following Bukubuku Shagama's order, they would probably fight the undead and monsters, rather than humans, who are also fighting these creatures. And the destroyed villages would more likely be seen by Bukubuku Shagama as the work of monsters, of the undead, and not of the Sunlight Scripture. In other words, Aura and Mare and Bukubuku Shagama would end up helping the Sunlight Scripture. And they would realize how overwhelmingly powerful Aura and Mare are, and since the 1,000-mile astrologer is observing them, there would be a great excitement within Slayn. It would appear to the higher ranks as if one of their gods, who was originally an elf, or rather their children, had returned. Additionally, because Bukubuku Shagama's slime body is flexible, and Solution could show her how she could take on a human form, she wouldn't be instantly recognized as a heteromorph, but perhaps as the offspring of another of their gods. So in other words, she would appear human in the eyes of Slayn at first. Meanwhile, Peroronchino and Sheltir, perhaps drawn by the sound of battle, would also be nearby, but they would encounter the Black Scripture instead, who is also fighting the undead. And if a fight were to break out, Peroronchino, having human emotions, would still try to talk and de-escalate the situation. And he would do this until Sheltir gets mind-controlled, since Sheltir alone could still drive the Black Scripture into retreat and just drive them back like she did in the actual canon story timeline despite being alone. Peroronchino would be able to restrain at least one of them and likely capture the leader. In other words, while Bukubuku Shagama would be having positive experiences with the slain Theocracy and troops of them, a burning hatred would ignite within Peroronchino, because Sheltir would no longer respond to him. Then finally the siblings would contact each other. With Aura's beasts, Mare's earthquakes, and the dragons, the zombies would be quickly defeated, and the devastated city would be swiftly rebuilt, thanks to Mare's earth magic. Again, this would be seen as yet another miracle, while Peroronchino would be demanding retribution for the attack on Sheltir. However, Bukubuku Shagama could calm him down, especially since Sheltir was still under mind control, and therefore the attackers were needed. And now the Sunlight Scripture would find himself in serious need of explanations, and would likely try to contact the leaders of Slayn. And by now they would have also recognized the seriousness of the situation and would appear in person. However, after Cairo was defeated, who had been the previous bearer of the world item Downfall of Castle and Country, there would be no one left in Slane capable of using this world item to free Sheltier from its very own enthrallment. And Peroronchino, I believe, would show then a different side of himself, since he's a power gamer who did everything to become stronger. In this situation, he would just demand the world item as compensation. In return, Slane's idea of being worshipped as gods likely wouldn't be rejected by either of them. And the NPCs in Nezeric would already tell them that they are higher beings. And if Slane also claimed the same, that they are indeed supreme beings, then it must be true. And just like the 6 players who founded Slane 600 years ago, where they were worshipped as gods, Peroronchino and Bukubuku Shagama would also be seen as divine beings, even though they are heteromorphs. However, just like angels are heteromorphs and seen as a blessing, the two would likely also be seen at the very least as avatars or as blessings from the gods. And again, Slane had already worshipped 2 non-human gods before, an elf and an undead overlord, Surshana. So this in turn would lead to a meeting with Rufus, the first servant of Surshana, and likely also an undead. And even if he realized they were not players, he recognized they would still be useful for Slane. Perhaps Rufus would even induct them into the Pantheon, under the condition that they somehow revive the old gods. Something that could be easily possible with the now 12 world-class items resting in Nezeric, and another thing, wish upon a star. And even if Longinius, the world item that can completely erase a player, had been used, it can only be used once. In other words, 5 of the 6 players could probably be brought back regardless of Longinius, and even Longinius could be combated. And here it gets really interesting, because I suspect that among these 6 players there would be a familiar face for the siblings. Specifically, I think the elf in the Slane Theocracy's pantheon could be the younger sister of Yamaiko, who also had an elven avatar, the sister that is, and because of this she couldn't join the Great Tomb of Nezeric like her older sister Yamaiko did, as they only accepted players with heteromorphic avatars. And I believe this would be the beginning of a lasting alliance, with Yamaiko's younger sister serving as an emotional link between Slane. With the humanocentric worldview of Slane, the fame and recognition the siblings would receive, with Peroronchino's ambition, and the lack of emotional restraint that makes the two vulnerable for hubris and flattery, Slane could finally realize its grand dream of uniting a human world. And just like in Warhammer 40k, a great crusade would begin to wipe out all non-human and non-allied life, and unite humanity under one ruler. And with that said, what do you think about what would happen if both Peroronchino and Bukubuku Shagama had entered the new world instead of Ainz? Let me know it down in the comment section. And with that said, please check out my German channel, and if you don't want to listen to my voice or accent, but are still very interested in the things I have to say, I have made an AI channel, narrated by almost a woman, where I use AI voiceovers for my videos, and the channels are all linked down in the video description. Also, please check out my Patreon if you want to support me beyond just leaving a like or sub. And with that said, I say thank you very much for watching, thanks to my Patreons for supporting this channel, and as usual, I say my special thanks to Order Daddy Order, ASK, Bad Girl Yee, Bad Burrito 316, Beezer, Ben C, Brandon S, Brandon D, Chrissy, Crowley 0221, Sia, Crystal Prime, Dead Slime, Death is Mercy, Deathless Dragonlord, Demon Xenomorph 1987, Devin Downen, Ding Dong, Din Pep, Dragonlord Placido Saxophone, Duckwagon, Dunkler Krieger, Dystopia, Dystopia II, Enigmatic Unicorn, Feralchivan, Guy with That Head, Hector Marino, Hoss, Huster, Jacob G, Jana B, Jason, J. Morris, Chromius, Kyle R, Lee K. Long, Legendarius, Lelouch Britannia Viffy Mustache, Lexus Fox, Lord Nishikian Rai, Lord Touch Me, Love Razor, Merovec, Mr. Shoes, Mr. Tweaker, Michael R, Michael Y, Nope, Oh Hell No, Normal Toad, Oh Kill, Overlord General Gasper, Paddy Pentum, Personage, Ruru, Primus 11, Rhinomere, Q&A Caracos P, Shergox's Daddy, Shadow Lightning Wolf, Shrine Keeper, Sir Axolotl, Super Tier Magic Batista Bomb, Supreme Cheese, Staris, Ted, Texas Deer, The Orc Warboss, Rocket Smasher, T.E. Wang, Vash Hawkeye, Vegito27, Venture Fanatic, Wilhelm, Xenokai, and Sonagon. Thanks guys. Anyway, have a nice day, and I hope to see you all again soon on my next video.